Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And I'm so glad we're gathered together to listen to a fabulous story tonight. And this is part 2 of our story. So if you haven't heard part 1, click on the description because you don't want to miss out on the whole story. And let's get started with part 2 of our story. 1 year later, it had been an exhausting afternoon at the Allison Wonderland boutique in town, where I was working as the manager of an up-and-coming clothing store. The name was borne about by the really unusual collection of clothes that were so ethereal and lightweight, made from stunningly high-quality fabrics that some would describe as dreamy, hence the name. I was about to close up the store in the late afternoon when a customer ran up to the boutique, clearly out of breath. I'm so sorry. I know it's awfully late, but do you mind dreadfully if I take a quick peek? I've been driving past your boutique every day, and let's just say I've been meaning to look at your stuff. It's so individualistic, so bohemian. I love that. I loathe the status quo or the traditional predictable designs. They bore me rigid. When I go to a function, I like to know that no one else will be wearing a dress quite like me. And these clothes of yours would make any woman, regardless of size, feel like a princess, I'm quite sure. She'd be able to make her own statement. Well, they're meant to flatter all figures, I told her. Please, I said, with a warm, upbeat gesture, take as long as you like. I'm in no rush to get closed. That's kind of you to say. They're meant to flatter all figures, I told her. Please, I said, with a warm, upbeat, friendly gesture. Take as long as you like to look around. I'm in no rush to get closed. That's awfully kind of you. Wait a minute, she said to me. Don't I know you? Were you not at Charleston School of Arts? I think I was in your class. Do you remember me, Fiona Duncan? You're Katiana Ellis, am I right? I was floored. The last time I'd seen Fiona, well, she didn't look like this. The ugly duckling had turned into a swan. I never envisaged such a plain Jane at school, with her thick bottle glasses and dull mousy hair, would ever turn out to look like this. The woman was now boasting bouncy hair that was highlighted, and her brown eyes, without those god-awful glasses, were so pretty. At school, Fiona had been one of my very best friends, as she'd always been a barrel of laughs, and I'd thoroughly enjoyed hanging around her. You are Fiona Duncan, I said. No, you aren't. You can't be. I am, Fiona. You look incredible. Well, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. You don't look so bad yourself. The two of us threw our arms around each other excitedly. Oh, I've got so much to tell you, said Fiona. I've been married twice over, would you believe it? I'm still with husband number 2, thankfully. How do you feel about going to one of the bars in town, having a meal and a lovely long chat? You're not too busy, are you? She asked obsequiously. Or should we do it another day, if you like? But it's just so good to see you after all this time. It's been so long, far too long, if you ask me. How can I possibly refuse? I said. Even if I did have a prior engagement, I'd cancel them, because it's fabulous to see you. Oh, I am so pleased to hear you say that, Katiana. You have no idea how thrilled I am to see you again. And I'm quite sure you've got so much to tell me. And likewise, there is so much to tell you. This is going to be fun. Let's go. I don't know how long me and Fiona sat there in the bar in town talking. But we were so engrossed and absorbed in each other's conversations that if people had been dancing around us stark naked, or smashing plates on the floor like at a Greek family wedding, I can honestly tell you this, I probably wouldn't have noticed a thing. It was as if in that moment all that mattered was what Fiona Duncan had to tell me, and everything else just faded into the background, as if it was of very little significance. I only had 1 glass of wine because I was driving. I barely even ate my meal that I ordered. It was too exciting to reconnect with my old friend. Food was the last thing on my mind. I hasten to say Fiona and me were almost kicked out of the bar, as people had long since left. It was 12:30 at night. I was stunned to discover that the bar was completely empty of all its inhabitants. Everybody had just vanished, and I hadn't even noticed a thing. It was a little like being robbed by thieves in the middle of the night, and you wake up in the morning to discover everything around you has been taken, without your knowledge. "I don't normally close up my premises so late," the friendly bar manager told us, "but I sensed you two had a lot of catching up to do, as the two of you have been so absorbed in each other all evening. I sent the waitress over to you a few times to ask you if you wanted anything more to drink, and neither of you even noticed her. She said to me, 'Those are old friends who haven't seen each other in years,' and believe me, I know what that is like. I'm very happy for you getting together after all this time, but now I really must insist you go, or the wife will kill me when I get back. She's always telling me I'm too soft on the punters." "Don't be a stranger," said Fiona, throwing her arms around me and giving me a big kiss on the cheek. "It's been amazing seeing you again, Katiana. Call me, please," she said, making a gesture of a telephone at her ears. "I've someone I would so love you to meet. The two of you would be so good together." "Don't worry about me," I assured her. "I'm footloose and fancy-free, and I have no intention of getting embroiled in a relationship any time soon. But thanks for the thought anyway. You'll change your mind when you meet my friend. He's quite the charmer, I can assure you." "I don't think so," I said, shaking my head. "It's been good to see you, Fiona. Don't forget to pop around to the boutique. I'll give you a 20% discount." "I'll hold you to that, Katiana," she teased. I trotted out of the bar, feeling both exhilarated but exhausted. Let's just say reconnecting with an old friend again after such a long time was very thrilling indeed, but also incredibly tiring. I felt as if I had been flung on a roller coaster ride at a fairground, and now that I was acclimatizing, after being tossed around the place like the rice in a rattle, I felt like I wanted to just drop. I knew when I got home, I was going to flop back on the bed like a rag doll and be out for the count. I trudged over to my car, my legs feeling heavy beneath me, like blocks of cement, my walking laboured, my posture slouched, and my eyelids drooping. If indeed anyone happened to be watching me, they would likely think I was inebriated or bladdered, but let me tell you, fatigue can resemble drunkenness at times. I opened up the driver's side door and sank back gratefully into the leather seat, with a thankful sigh. I closed my eyes and was tempted to go straight to sleep, but that would not be a good look, falling asleep in a parking lot like this. I needed to drive back home, down some of those dark country roads, and this was something I did not appreciate doing. I avoided driving at night whenever I possibly could. I didn't mind driving at night normally in areas where everything was lit up by street lights, but the area where my grandmother lived was very dark, without any street lights, so for miles around, the only light to illuminate my path would be that of the moon and, of course, my car headlights. I sat in my car for a brief moment, reflecting rather soberly on the night's events, and how fabulously good it had been to see Fiona Duncan again after all these years. I was about to start up my engine when a tall, ambiguous but shadowy figure appeared to be standing outside my car, and then leaning towards me and ramming on the window. I wanted to scream, "Go away! Leave me alone!" but I politely wound down my window to see who it was. "Hello, Katiana! Do you remember me? It's Morris. We met a year ago in the department store. You were buying gloves for your mother. I told you that you looked like my late wife. I saw you in the bar earlier on. I'd been waiting for you in the car to have a word. I knew I couldn't speak to you and get a word in edgeways. You were caught up in a conversation with some other woman. So I knew once you'd parted ways with her, I might just get a chance to have a word, so to speak. I thought of you a great deal over the last year, hoping I would bump into you like this. This must be serendipitous. I was wondering." "I'm sorry, Morris. I need to go. I'm exhausted." I knew I was being rude, But I really didn't care. I was dog-tired, and politeness had abandoned me, as my body had other priorities right now, and sleep came first on my menu. I knew I would regret being rude to this kind man. And right now, this annoying man was a mosquito. Why wouldn't he leave me alone? I closed my window abruptly, putting my foot down on the accelerator. My car moved away. Morris was waving me down frantically in the car lot. He was opening his mouth like a goldfish and saying something, but I willfully ignored him. I carried on with my foot on the gas, and I accelerated out of the car lot as fast as I could. When I glanced out of my visor mirror, I could see I was being shadowed by another car, flashing its lights at me to get my attention. I knew it was Morris. He wanted me to stop, probably so he could get my phone number, and we could go out sometime. That's why he'd been waiting for me in the parking bay at the bar, until I finally parted company with Fiona Duncan. I wasn't interested. I told him that a year ago. Nothing had changed since then. Could he not get the message? "Leave me alone, will you?" I growled under my breath in exasperation. For a long while Morris's car followed me, but then it thankfully went away, taking a left-hand fork in the road and disappearing from my sight. Thank God he'd finally got the message. Was he really that dim? I sighed with relief, as I'd finally got him off my tail. I was exhausted now. I could barely keep my eyes open. My lids kept shutting like the blinds on a window. I was cursing myself for not having the wisdom and foresight to order a coffee from the bar in town before I embarked on my journey. The caffeine would almost certainly have helped fight off the sluggish exhaustion that was consuming me right now. My father had always warned me it was dangerous to drive when you were fatigued, and could almost be as threatening as driving drunk. And his warning words resonated with me right now. I felt as if I was ready to just drop like a flower in the valley that buckles over and surrenders itself to the earth. I was on the precarious part of my journey, driving through a heavily wooded area where both sides of the roads were crowded with ubiquitous tall lofty trees that stretched back for many miles. I don't mind admitting that this was the stretch of the journey that I dreaded every time. It was these back roads in South Carolina that would leave me closing the doors of the boutique early in the winter, as I dreaded driving in the dark. It was navigating these roads at night which made me wonder whether living in my grandmother's country cottage was a wise decision at all, and was worth the trouble. It would be so much easier renting an apartment in town. This desolate, remote country road seemed to close in on me claustrophobically from every side, as if the trees themselves were going to reach out and grab me from my car with their gnarled boughs. It seemed so bodefully menacing, and the dark, inauspicious shadows that moved through the trees left ominous suggestions on my imagination that I did not want to entertain. There could be anything out there, hiding among those trees. It was insufferably tenebrous, and I tried to focus on the road ahead, where my headlights pierced through the velvet blackness with their bright beams of light. But if I merely glanced even briefly at the trees on the side of the road, that were like ambiguous hooded giants, it felt as if they were about to pounce at me from the dark shadows. Then I would begin to panic. I kept closing my eyes tightly, and very nearly slipping off to sleep. On one occasion I very nearly went ploughing into a tree. It was then that I realized that my exhaustion had completely defeated me. If I did not surrender to it, I could end up in a very nasty, possibly tragic car accident. I knew that the only sensible thing to do in the circumstances was to pull over to the side of the road and climb into the back seat to have a sleep. I toyed with the idea of phoning my mother to ask her to pick me up, but I couldn't get her up at this late hour and expect her to negotiate her way down a dark country road like this, when she also hated driving at night. That would be an unkind thing to do. I fumbled around awkwardly in my purse and retrieved my cell phone. I left my mother a message, even though I doubted she was awake to actually receive it, but I didn't want her to worry about me unnecessarily. "Staying overnight in town," I wrote. "See you in the morning." I certainly did not want to tell her the truth, that I was going to sleep on the side of the road. She would have been mortified if she knew that. I can assure you, in every other eventuality, I would have done my level best to get away from this desolate, remote, isolated road and get home as quickly as I could. But I did not care a toss anymore. That is what exhaustion does for you. It defeats the tormenting demons that normally plagued me when I drove down this long, lonely stretch of road at night. But my fear was placed on a back burner and had no power to wrestle with my deflated body that was physically far too worn out to give a damn. I could have slept in a dumpster for all I cared. I pulled over to an ideal little pebbled clearing on the side of the road, sighing with relief. This was the perfect spot for me to park. And even if it wasn't, I wasn't going to trouble myself with such obscure, insignificant considerations. I thankfully climbed over onto the back seat, which was soft and comfortable. The malleable leather was cool to the touch, swaddling my body like a refreshing shower. I groaned appreciatively, closing my eyes. Luckily it was summer, so it wasn't cold, and the moment I hit the seat, I was out like a light. For beyond closing my eyes, I remember nothing more. I'm not sure how long I slept for, but I awoke feeling slightly refreshed, but very disorientated. My car was wobbling around precariously, and I was shaking, jolting, and banging around inside it like a plum in a Tupperware container. What the hell was going on? I sat up with a start. Where was I? I wiped away the cloying sleep from my eyes and let out a sizable yawn. Was this a dream? It had to be. But no, it wasn't. My car was moving on its own accord, as if it had become a gurney in the ICU, and I had become the long-suffering patient. My car was not on the ground anymore. Something or someone was carrying my car. I peered through the windscreen windows and through the gloomy glaze of the dark night. I could see the ambiguous silhouettes of something monstrously big, with ponderous shoulders and huge arms, carrying my car from the front. And another gargantuan being was carrying me from the rear side of the car. You have got to be kidding me. What the hell was going on? My heart thundered against my chest wall so violently, I thought it would explode. My blood was running freezing cold. I felt like a live sardine trapped in a can that needed to get the hell out of the can before it got eaten alive. I opened up the driver's side door, jumping out of the car, running away as fast as I possibly could. But my legs felt like heavy lumps of cement beneath me. My ankles twisted at awkward angles as my feet hit the gravel road. The shoes I was wearing were grossly impractical. I pulled them off my feet, throwing them onto the ground. In my bare feet I ran across the road towards the tall gathering of trees. They were my only hope. I could hear the sound of my car being dropped onto the ground with a powerful, clattering, clanging sound, like two metal drums being banged against each other. I heard heavy feet pounding after me, giving me chase. The ground heaved as these beings pursued me. It was like the monsters from my childhood that I believe lay in wait for me under my bed had now taken on human form. They had morphed into my reality. This could not be happening to me. I was gripped by an unquenchable fear that antagonized every single cell in my entire body, that was screaming for mercy, but no one came to my help. Everything seemed so surreal, as if I'd woken up in an alternative Jurassic Park-type reality, where dinosaurs loomed around and popped out from you at every corner, waiting to tear you apart, limb from limb. Oh my God! Something was going to eat me. I just knew it. I had to get the hell out of here, and the only way of escape was through these trees. But it was so pitch black, so menacing, so inhospitable, so unfriendly. I could barely see where I was going. Even my hands before my face seemed to just disappear in front of my very eyes, because I couldn't even make out my fingers. I glanced over my shoulders, and I could see two pairs of yellow eyes blazing through the darkness, and tall, lofty silhouettes of the most Herculean-sized creatures that I have ever discerned in my life. My heart felt as vacuously hollow and empty, like an Easter egg, My mind was a whirl, with only one thought in occupancy, and that was to run, run, and run. My adrenaline steadily coursed through my blood, and I knew what it felt like to be an elk pursued by a mountain lion. This was no fun. I could almost see my life flashing before me. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to die. I had so much to live for. I ran through this dark abyss. The wood grove was dark, ambiguous, a void full of treacherous stumbling blocks that were desirous to trip me up at every turn. My breathing was fast and furious. The only way to describe it is I didn't have a clue where the hell I was going. I couldn't see a thing. That was how dark the woodgrove was. I was clumsily bumping into trees, tripping over ferns, shrubs, and angry gnarled roots that pushed themselves through the ground like hungry hands that wanted to grab me. My bare feet did me no favours, as spikes pierced through my feet, causing me instant pain. But I was oblivious to it. I had to get away. I had to find somewhere to hide, or whatever was after me would eat me alive. That was when I found a hedge of brambles. I didn't care about the obtrusive, sharp, jagged, unfriendly spikes that might cut me to shreds. But they could also protect me from these two predators that were pursuing me. My skin teared, almost like the ladders in a pair of tights. But I was oblivious to the pain. As I crawled hurriedly under the bush, my heart was close to the ground, beating and pounding furiously. And that was when I heard them. They were standing only yards away from me. The next thing I knew is this huge thorny bush of briars was shredded away from above me, as if it was merely a feather. I found myself looking up into the eyes of two powerful, lofty creatures. I froze to the spot, unable to move. I was so afraid. And then a booming voice spoke to me in a strange, curious language. It was powerful and authoritative, warm and kind. The words plunged into my head like water from a forceful faucet, and then the meaning of the words seemed to dive into my mind so seamlessly. Matilani kalinokwa, o masilakinakwa, holinitilakila mikolono soninaki, hizali kaliko masa. Why are you so afraid? We have no intention of hurting you. We did not mean to scare you. I'm sorry we woke you up. You were sleeping over a portal. We had to move you. In a second, my fear abandoned me, as my eyes now focused on the two lofty, majestic creatures, and I suddenly knew exactly what they were. They were both Bigfoot, and close up and personal, under the shimmering light of a pearly moon that audaciously cut through an open branch. I saw that although very intimidating, they were possibly the most benevolent creatures I have ever encountered. What do you mean by portal? I asked them. Hinatilakina hokwani sakishana. Holina ginakwo amasilakina omonakina lita sikashakwana. You don't know what a portal is? The Bigfoot asked me. It's an opening into another world, into another realm. If you fell through the portal, we might not get you back. The land has energy fields. You parked your car bang in the middle of a very vibrant portal. We were concerned for your safety. I know that your eyes are not accustomed to the dark, so let us both show you your way safely back to your car. The female Bigfoot rushed up to me. She was examining my scratches. Pukola! Oh, Mokola! Ilitani! Oh, Gosha! Look at you, she said, shaking her head furiously. You've been cut to shreds. I tell you what, get onto my shoulders. I'm not sure, I stammered awkwardly. Akiko! Matalaki! I won't bite, said the female Bigfoot. I'm here to help you. I'll be fine, I insisted. But when, after a few more thorns pierced through my feet, I reluctantly agreed to climb onto the Bigfoot's shoulders, it was strange. She smelt like my mother's tabby cat, Ernest, who was forever rolling in the dust. It was an earthy smell that was not unpleasant. The female Bigfoot, with the grace of a ballerina, and with her powerful feet, she thundered across the woodgrove like a herd of bison over the American plains. She moved with a rhythmic fluidity. Her movements were serene, like a boat bobbing across the water, and I began to giggle as I held on to her long dark hair. I almost felt like a kid again, and when we reached the car, I don't mind admitting I was a tad disappointed. I didn't want this ride to end. The Bigfoot finally lowered her body so I could climb off her. She stared at me earnestly through her kind, dark eyes. The moonlight began to cut through the trees, washing itself generously over the Bigfoot's human-like face. And in that moment, I was struck by how incredibly kind she was. The male Bigfoot and the female Bigfoot stood together, like a salt and pepper cellar on a table, watching me as I got into my car and started up my engine. "Thank you," I called out to them. "Thank you very much." They stood there in the middle of the road, watching me drive away, until they were all but ants on the landscape. When I got back home and opened the cottage door, my mother came rushing over to me, looking as belligerent as a Rottweiler on a bad hair day. "Where the hell have you been? I've been worried sick. You never returned home from the boutique, and you've been gone for ages and ages. I thought something dreadful had happened to you." "Mum, I sent you text telling you that I was fine." "No, you didn't," she insisted. "I did," I said, retrieving my cell phone from my purse to show my mother. I realised to my horror I'd sent my messages to Fiona Duncan instead of my mother. "Look at you," said my mother. "You're covered in blood and scratches. What the hell happened to you?" "Mum," I said, "if I told you, you would never believe me." 3 weeks later, I was incredibly frustrated. I was looking forward to having dinner with Fiona Duncan and her husband Theo. Of course I was, but I wished to God she wasn't so intent on setting me up with some stranger. I wasn't interested in getting involved with anyone, but Fiona was so sweet. I didn't have the heart to turn down her kind invitation. That would be so graceless. It had taken a long while for the scratches on my face and arms to finally heal, but when I looked in the mirror, my face no longer looked all scratched up. I had told anyone who'd asked me that I'd fallen into a hedge of brambles. I'm quite sure they were wondering how anyone would end up tangled in a hedge of briars, but even though they gave me funny looks, they didn't ask me any awkward questions. I arrived at Fiona's house in a green leafy neighbourhood in Tegger Cay, which is in York County in South Carolina. She lived in a very attractive modern-looking home with her husband. I was wearing a little black dress and a pair of low-heeled, strappy sandals. My feet had not fully recovered yet from my run in the woodgrove. They still hurt on occasion. "Oh, there you are, Katiana, darling. How lovely it is to see you," said Fiona, throwing her arms around me. "Now let me introduce you to Morris. Morris, meet Katiana." I stood there in absolute astonishment. As I stood there staring at Morris, the man I'd first encountered in the department store when I was buying leather gloves for my mother. "Hello, Morris," I said rather shyly. "How are you?" "I'm fine," he said. "And how are you?" "Well," I said. "You know each other?" asked Fiona, looking befuddled. "But I don't understand."
We have met each other a few times," Morris admitted. "Well, twice, to be exact. Katiana here bears a remarkable resemblance to my late wife."
"Really?" said Fiona. "I had no idea." "I'm so sorry," I said. "About the other night, I mean. How rude I was 3 weeks ago. I was so exhausted. I met up with Fiona here for the first time in years, and when you came knocking at my windscreen, I was not in the mood to engage in any social niceties. It wouldn't have mattered who you were, I'm afraid. I'm a bear with a sore head when I'm tired. I can become cantankerous and moody."
"It was Fiona you met up with in the bar?" asked Morris, shaking his head. I didn't even recognize her. If I had, I would have asked her for your number and contacted you myself. I suppose when I observed you in the bar talking to a woman, I didn't focus on the woman that was with you. I tried to get your attention, but you were so caught up in an animated conversation. So that was why I waited in the car lot for you, to part ways. I know that sounds really predatory of me, but I was so worried I wasn't going to see you again, and I had no way of knowing how to contact you. I did not want you to slip through my fingers like butter again, so that's why I pounced on you when you came out of the bar. I did not mean to harass you, and I apologize profusely for that. I also should not have followed you in the car like I did. I wanted to tell you, Katiana, that yes, you do look like my late wife, but I would like to get to know you for yourself, not because you look like her. That was what I wanted to say. I think there was a definite spark between the two of us. It seems a shame not to explore that spark, to see where it takes us. I would be grateful if you would consider coming out with me for a few times, to see where we go to from here.
I'll think about it, I told him.
Oh, my word, said Fiona, looking at Theo with bright eyes. I think I'm in the wrong profession, sweetheart. I was meant to be a professional matchmaker. I saw these two in my mind as suiting each other. I think they're meant to be together.
2 years later. 2 years had swept by at the speed of light, and I couldn't believe that I was married to Maurice Jenner, and I'm glad he loved me for myself alone, and not because I resembled his late wife. It would seem beyond my physical similarity to his late wife. I was exceedingly different to her in every regard. But Maurice loved me for being myself. We were on our way to my grandmother's cottage to celebrate our second wedding anniversary, as my grandmother was of the opinion that all anniversaries should be celebrated with the whole family. My grandmother adored Maurice like a son. She said he reminded her of her late husband.
Those two are cut out of exactly the same cloth,
she told me. I had seen pictures of my late grandfather, and the likeness he shared to Maurice was actually quite startling.
Maurice is such a delightful man. It is so tragic how he lost his first wife, Crystal. But now he has a second chance at happiness with you, Katiana, and I can see he loves the bones of you. You have found yourself a keeper in Maurice, she told me. He is a wonderful man.
A keeper whom I initially thought was a creep, I admitted to her.
That is the huge problem with the youth of today. So quick to judge, said my grandmother, shaking her head sadly. Honestly, you don't always assume that a book is the same as its cover. But today, that's how people look at each other. They judge each other based on their physical appearances, and they can get things so horribly wrong.
My grandmother was right, of course, but that wouldn't be the first time. She was usually right about most things. I'd seen Maurice peering at me when I was buying gloves from Tina at the department store. I'd thought he was a creep. And when those two ambiguous Bigfoots were carrying my car away from a portal, I thought they had a nefarious agenda towards me, and that two monsters from my childlike nightmares had come back to life, and on both counts I had been horribly wrong. I'm not sure what time it was when Maurice began driving his truck down the same inauspicious stretch of forsaken road where I'd taken a nap on that night, when exhaustion had taken hold of me, and I had no choice but to resign myself to sleeping on the back seat of my car, over a little clearing of pebbles that the Bigfoots assured me was a portal of some kind.
"Stop!" I told him suddenly. "Stop the car right here."
"Why?" he asked me. "Why do you want me to stop here?" "Because this is the spot where I parked my car, on the day I encountered those Bigfoot that I told you about. They said I'd parked my car over a portal. They claimed this little clearing over here is actually a portal of some kind. I wanted to see if I could sense anything." "Like what?" he asked me.
"I don't know," I said.
"Just humour me, will you, please?" We parked our car on the edge of where the Bigfoots claimed had been a portal, and I walked over to the spot, and I kid you not, when me and my husband stood over the area, we both sensed as if the ground wanted to swallow us like quicksand. I've never experienced anything like that before or since.
"Bloody hell," said my husband. "I'm getting the hell out of here. That is definitely a portal.
So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.